getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi. I'm getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi. Well, I'm lumped up, but I'm okay. It's gonna get lumped up anyway. You better call back the posse. Just getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi. Getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi.
Welcome, everybody, to Rockshow episode 179. We're continuing our May episodes of the Rockshow on country music. Last week, 2 weeks ago, actually, was Hank Williams. And this week we have George Jones, another very important country pioneer. Rob, you know, George Jones to me is the quintessential country crying your whiskey. You know,
yeah.
your girl left you for your best friend, your dog ran away, your truck doesn't start, kind of fucking music. What do you think?
It is. And when you play it backward, you get everything back.
That's right. When you play this country music, everything comes back to you. That's funny. I like George Jones. You know, it's just something about him. He was a bit of a tragic figure in a lot of ways. Like, you know, the thing with like even Hank Williams and George Jones and several other, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, you know, so many of these guys were even like more rebellious than people that are considered rebellious, you know, like punkers and stuff like that. Okay. You know, punk rock bands and everything, you know, Sid Vicious and all that. These guys were like off the wall crazy. You know, George Jones is known for crazy erratic behavior from drinking.
You also miss shows, like not show up.
Yeah. Well, Hank Williams did that too. You know, They're just too lumped up to come out and play. And I mean, Jones went years and years without ever doing a sober show. It's amazing. Okay. I mean,
well, he had a much longer career than Hank.
Yes, he did. Yeah, very much.
Like
okay.
This guy was putting song until almost the day he died. Like Johnny.
Yeah, and he had several comebacks, which is, you know, amazing. I'd like to think, you know, he passed away in 2013, but I'd like to think that he may have even gone like the Johnny Cash route at some point and teamed up with Rick Rubin. That would have been amazing if that would have happened, you know, and just reinvent yourself. But he was a purist. He took his music very seriously. He was a tragic figure in a way, you know, between the drinking and the drugs and stuff.
And I think he lumped up Tammy a few times, right?
Well, in her book, she says that. He denied it, but
he denied it. I think the guy must have lumped him
up. You know, I mean, you could deny things if you don't remember them.
He was drunk. He was lumped up.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. I'll be like, no, that didn't happen. Oh well, yeah, you don't remember because you were wasted.
Have you watched the Showtime
George and Tammy thing?
Yeah,
no.
I haven't watched it either.
I heard it's very good. I'm gonna make time to watch it soon.
Somebody told me it's hard to get through that first episode. Like it's kind of slow, but they're building up a story. So
I think there's was there about 6 episodes or something? I don't think there's that many.
Something like that.
Yeah. All right, so we got a long one today. I got almost 20 pages of notes.
All right,
Mr. George Jones. It's going to be a good one. Just jumping right in.
From humble beginnings.
Very, very humble beginnings in Texas, southeastern Texas. Now he was born George. He was born George Glenn Jones on September 12th, 1931, in the Saratoga, Texas area. What's that?
It sounds like a politician's name.
George Glenn Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. I will vote for George Glenn Jones.
Now, he was born in Saratoga, Texas, but raised in Colmesneil, Texas, with his brother and 5 sisters in what was called the Big Thicket region of southeastern Texas.
I didn't realize he had so many sisters.
He did.
Holy shit.
Yep. Now, his father, George Washington Jones, worked in a shipyard and played harmonica and guitar, while his mother, Clara, played piano at the Pentecostal church that they used to attend on Sundays. Now, when George was delivered by the doctor accidentally dropped him. okay, and broke his arm. All right, so what a way to come out into the world. So when he was 7, his parents bought him a radio, and he heard country music for the first time. That was his very first experience with it. And he would often say that he listened to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday nights, and he would ask his mother, if I fall asleep, wake me up, because he didn't want to miss anything. Okay. He would love to listen to Roy Acuff, Bill Monroe, all those early country guys. Roy Acuff was a big influence on Hank Williams, too. We mentioned that the last show.
Yeah.
George's childhood was really not an easy one at all. His father developed a drinking problem after one of his daughters, Ethel, passed away at an early age.
Wow.
George Sr. often came home drunk with his friends. They were very rowdy and could be abusive to him, to George, and to the other people in the family, including his wife.
Wow.
Often in these drunken rages, George Sr. would demand his wife and George to sing for him. Okay. And this type of abuse, you would think, made him not want to sing, but it kind of, in his mind, it kind of made him want to sing even more. It just made him like in a situation where he felt he had to sing. That's what he had to do. Okay. His father bought him his first guitar at 9 years old, and he learned how to play it at the church that he was attending. He often began what's called busking, which is basically playing on the street for tips, in the Beaumont, Texas area. Now, by the time he was 16, George left home and relocated to Jasper, Texas, where he sang and played on the KTXJ radio station with fellow musician Dalton Henderson. He would later work at the KRIC radio station as well. Now, one afternoon while working on the radio, he met his idol, Hank Williams. And he later admitted that he was speechless, couldn't say anything, was totally nervous, but did get to meet him. He also admitted that this happened at a time when he just was only listening to Hank Williams. It was like all he could listen to. Okay, so he was obsessed with them. Now, Jones was briefly married to Dorothy Bonvillian in 1950, but the marriage didn't last, and they broke up in 1951.
Yeah, that's like a year, right?
Yeah, less than a year, and then he would enlist in the Marines and was stationed in San Jose, California for his whole time. Never had to go overseas, luckily, in the Korean War. And then his discharge happened in 1953. Jones, in 1954, would remarry. He would marry Shirley Ann Corley. And in January of that year, he began his association with H.W. Pappy, also known as Pappy Daly, who was a producer and manager for him for a long time. And this is when he got affiliated with Starday Records. His first record for that label was the self-penned song No Money in This Deal. It was recorded in January of that year and released as a single in February. It was recorded in Starday co-founder Jack Starnes' living room and produced by Starnes as well. Okay. Jones also worked at KTRM, which is now known as KZZB in Beaumont, Texas. DJ Slim Baxter coined a nickname for George at this time. He called him George P. Williker Pickle Puss Possum Jones.
What a name.
Yeah. Now, Slim, who was the main DJ there, he thought with George's buzz cut that he had and beady little eyes like a possum that he just resembled that animal. Okay. The Possum nickname would stick for the rest of his life. People would call him Possum. But George Jones' time at Starday Records found him often being criticized for sounding too much like Hank Williams or his other hero, which was Lefty Frizzell. Also, the sound quality of these recordings were not that good. He didn't like them too much because they were recorded in a room that was really only soundproofed with eggshells, eggshell cartons.
Oh, okay.
And which is a way of soundproofing, but it's not the best. Often they had to delay recordings because the house that they were recording in was right off the highway, and there were a lot of trucks going by, and it was very just complicated. So in 1955, while still recording for Starday, George would have a number 4 country hit with the song Why Baby Why. Came out of nowhere, really, that
Why,
he had this
baby,
hit.
why?
He was also on the Louisiana Hayride show that year when he met Elvis Presley. And he also met Johnny Cash at that time.
So these hayride, they call them hayride show, but they were just shows that would pop up, right? Was that like a venue or?
It was a radio show that
Yeah.
would feature up-and-coming country artists and ones that you heard of, but up-and-coming ones too.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the Grand Ole Opry in that sense.
Yeah.
But the Grand Ole Opry was way more like formal, way more serious.
Yeah, because they're calling this the hayride. Did they just meet somewhere and record the artist?
I don't. It wasn't a hayride. They just called it that. Okay?
I know. But I mean, what did they record it? Did they have like a thing, or they?
Yeah. It was at a radio station in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Okay, and they would if you remember Hank Williams, I think it was in Western Louisiana somewhere.
Yeah.
That had that Shreveport, maybe something like that, and usually it was for people that. Not all the time, but it was for people that couldn't kind of make the Grand Ole Opry. You could get on the Louisiana Hayride, that kind of show.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Oh, so it's like the second tier, not the main tier.
Kind of, yeah. I wouldn't even say second tier, close to equal, but just a notch below.
Not a notch, all right.
So Jones would later get invited on the Grand Ole Opry in 1956. Okay, during his time with the Louisiana Hayride, he did develop a friendship with Johnny Cash. He said he didn't know Elvis that well, though. Okay, Elvis was by 56. Elvis was going in a totally different direction, but he became good friends with Johnny Cash, and it would remain that way for the rest of their lives. Now, with Elvis being so popular, George Jones was pressured to cut some rockabilly numbers. Okay, he didn't really have his heart in it. He reluctantly agreed. Okay, but he wasn't into this kind of music. He really was just traditional country. But later he would admit that he used the records like Rockit was a Rockit, Rockit. That was a single. There was a song called Daggone and How Come It, something like that. And he didn't even put his heart into these things. And he said when he got the records given to him, he used them as Frisbees. He had no interest. He actually was very much against it because, I mean, even though he did it, he didn't even use his real name. He used the name Thumper Jones.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to have George Jones' name attached to it. And later on, he would also attempt to buy the masters for all these rockabilly recordings because he didn't want them coming out at a later time. But he was unsuccessful doing that, and I guess they couldn't all be tracked down or whatever. And stuff would come out over the years. Yeah. Everybody knew it was Thumper Jones was George Jones. So in 1957, Jones switched to Mercury Records and teamed up with singer Jeanette Hicks, the first of several duet partners he would have over the years. He would have another top 10 single that year with the song Yearning. And Sade Records, who he was on before, actually merged with Mercury that year. And it allowed George, because they had all the rights to his music before. Yeah. It allowed him to make a full album called Don't Stop the Music. I think you had that up there before for a minute.
Yeah.
Despite this newfound success, George still toured local honky tonks, in rural Texas. Despite having these top 10 hits, he was playing small bars and stuff like that as well. He often rode around in a 1940s Packard with his name and number emblazoned on the side as advertisement. Well, one way to do it. In 1959, he had his first number one country hit with the song White Lightning, which ironically is a very rockabilly sounding song. Okay.
It is very rockabilly.
It was. Okay. And he had his name on that one. Okay. It's a song about drinking moonshine and bootlegging and all that stuff. That's how they get the. Did you know that that's how they get the title Mountain Dew?
Oh yeah.
Okay, like Mountain Dew was bootleg liquor. Okay, made up in the hills, in the country areas, and they used to call it White Lightning too. Okay, so he mentions Mountain Dew in the song, which is funny, and then years later, Mountain Dew would be a soda. still
Wow.
today, you know. So the song itself, White Lightning, was written by somebody we know, J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper.
Yeah.
Okay, the guy that did Chantilly Lace, passed away with Buddy Holly and Richie Valens in that crash.
That crazy crash.
Crazy crash. Now, alcohol use for Jones at this time was starting to become a problem. Okay. Right around the time of recording this track, he was quite drunk when he recorded White Lightning. Okay. In fact, he was so lumped up that rumor was he had to do 80 vocal takes to get it right. Okay.
That's not good, man.
No, that's not good, but it's a great song. And when you listen to it, you kind of pick up on it that he's a little wasted. Now, even though his first #1 was written by the Big Bopper, Jones was having success as a songwriter as well. He wrote or co-wrote many of his biggest hits in this period. Some of these became country music standards, such as The Window Up Above, that was later a hit by Mickey Gilley. Seasons of My Heart, which became a hit for Johnny Cash in 1975. Color of the Blues, later done by Loretta Lynn and Elvis Costello, who was a big fan of George Jones. Jones' most frequent songwriting collaborator was his childhood friend, Darrell Edwards. They often shared a writing credit. Now, in 1962, George Jones would sign with United Artists Records and immediately had one of his biggest hits, the song She Thinks I Still Care. Okay. His singing, great song. His singing vocals were becoming more like a deeper tone at this time. And that would kind of be where he would be at vocally for the rest of his career.
I think his voice changed a little later.
His voice deepened. His voice deepened around this time.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of cigarettes, a lot of booze, you know, whatever. I'm sure that had something to do with it. Yeah. And sometimes that happens with people with age anyway. Okay. Now, during this time with United Artists, Jones would record tribute albums to Hank Williams and Bob Wills, and he would cut an album of duets with singer Melba Montgomery, including the hit "We Must Have Been Out of Our Minds." It was it was at this period, too, that Jones was becoming known as a serious hellraiser and a drinker, okay? Often missing shows, often showing up drunk. On tour at this time, tour at this time, he would have a backing group called the Jones Boys. Now, there were many lineup changes of the Jones Boys over the years, but some names like Hank Singer, Sonny Curtis, and Johnny Paycheck, okay, spent time as Jones Boys as well, the famous Johnny Paycheck. In 1964, he had a new contract with Music-Core Records, and for the rest of the decade, he would only have one #1 hit, which would be 1967's Walk Through This World With Me. However, he owned the country music charts for the rest of the 60s with significant hits like Things Have Gone to Pieces, The Race Is On, I'll Share My World With You, A Good Year for the Roses, and If My Heart Had Windows. Jones' binge drinking and growing amphetamine use on the road caught up with him in 1967, and he was admitted into a neurological hospital to seek treatment for his drinking. Again, in those days, there were no rehab clinics and places like that, so you really just went to a hospital. That's it.
Yeah, they didn't have like rehab like they do now.
Now, they have hospitals just for this purpose, but back then, you know, even into the 70s, they didn't have stuff like that. Sometimes you went to a psychiatric hospital. Okay, for that too. That happened to Alice Cooper. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, now Jones was known to go through extreme lengths to get his liquor if none was available. And there's an infamous story, okay, that, you know, I guess is partial urban legend, but I think it is based in fact. Okay. His second wife, Shirley, got rid of all his booze and didn't want him drinking. And he lived about 8 miles away from the closest liquor store. So she took his car keys away so he couldn't go to the liquor store. He was looking around, couldn't find the keys, looked in the backyard, and there was his lawnmower, one of the types you ride. So that's what he did. The keys were in it. He got in his riding lawnmower
and got in
and drove 8 miles at 5 miles per hour to the liquor store. Okay. His wife at one point, right after he got there, realized what had happened and showed up, and quite a scene ensued there. Okay. He said something like, oh, here's my wife, she's going to kill me, something like that. Okay. Now, the incident became a popular story in country circles, and later on, George Jones would parody the event in a Hank Williams Jr. video called All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over. I think in the video, like, you see him riding on a lawnmower. Okay. Okay. The part of it that becomes a little bit of urban legend is that his next wife, Tammy Wynette, would actually, in her 1979 autobiography, say that happened to her, even though it supposedly happened to his other wife, Shirley. Okay, so I don't know, but that book is called Stand By Your Man. It's her autobiography, and it's a very good book. Now, I think it probably happened more than once.
It happened more than once.
They probably did.
They just took all the liquor out of the house. Like, this motherfucker's gonna get lumped up.
He's gonna get on the lawnmower. Just drive.
That's a story.
Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
There's always a way. Especially if you want to get that boost, you'll find a way to do it.
You will find a way to do it. I mean, remember The Lost Weekend? That's a great movie. Yeah. All the lengths he goes to hide the bottles and all that stuff, Anyway, speaking of Tammy Wynette, and you can't talk about George Jones without Tammy, he became aware of her in 1966 because their tours were booked by the same agency. And their paths often crossed on tours. Tammy also had her first minor hit in 1966 with the song Apartment Number 9, which was co-written, I believe, written entirely by Johnny Paycheck. Wynette was married to songwriter Don Chappell at the time.
Wow.
And Chappell was also an opening act for her at the time when she would play. The three of them, Chappell, Wynette, and Jones, became fast friends, okay? But not too long after George Jones started to kind of have feelings for Tammy. And she was about 11 years younger than him. Story goes that everything kind of came to a head one night when he was over their house for dinner, and Don and Tammy started having an argument in the kitchen. And Don called his wife a bitch, something like that, or son of a bitch, something like that. And George flipped out, threw the table over, all the dishes and food went flying, and he confessed his love for Tammy right there. And they were shocked. Okay? So, but what happened was, by 1969, they would get married. Okay? She would divorce Chappell and go with him. Okay? Sounds like a very fiery relationship, right? To start with,
Yeah.
It
And it's
was.
didn't the other guy, Hank Williams, did the same thing, but he put out a gun at the guy?
Yeah, that's right. But that wasn't to get married, but he would marry that woman later. Yeah, that's true. He pulled a gun. He said, she's my girlfriend now.
This guy just told that he loved her.
Yeah, he confessed his love. Now, they would marry in 1969, like I said, and they began touring together at that time. And Jones would buy out his contract with Music Corp so he could start recording with Tammy and her producer, Billy Sherrill, on Epic Records. That's what she was signed to. George had split recently with Pappy Davis as his manager after many years. By the early 70s, George Jones and Tammy Wynette became known as Mr. and Mrs. Country. Mr. and Mrs. Country Music, I should say.
Yep.
Now, they had scored several hits, including We're Gonna Hold On, Let's Build a World Together, Golden Ring, which is one of their best, Near You, and We're Not the Jet Set. Despite his love for Tammy Wynette, George's drinking did get worse. Okay, that's their daughter right there. in that picture. In October 1970, shortly after the birth of their only child, Tamala, who you saw in that picture, her name was Tamala George Jet Jones. Jones was then straitjacketed and sent to a padded cell at the Watson Clinic in Lakeland, Florida, after a seriously drunken bender. He went nuts. Okay. He detoxed there for 10 days and was released with a prescription for Librium, which is, I think, an early antidepressant or something like that they did out. He would enjoy some long periods of sobriety while married to Tammy, but as the decade wore on in the 70s, his erratic behavior and binge drinking would get worse. Okay. It led to the couple's divorce in 1976. Now, after Wynette's 1979 autobiography, like I mentioned before, was released, she claimed in the book that he beat her and did that often, and once even pulled a shotgun on her. Now, Jones vehemently denied this, but he did blame himself for the breakup of the marriage.
But he also could have been so freaking drunk that he didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Okay.
You know?
Now, even though they divorced, the couple did perform together at times, which when that happened, fans would kind of see how their songs mirrored their relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, because some of the songs were about having problems in the relationship and things like that. In 1980, they recorded the album Together Again and scored a hit with a song called Two-Story House. Jones often spoke publicly about wanting to reconcile with Tammy, that he wanted to get back with her, but it never would happen. Sometimes he would also joke on stage, changing the words of songs around, like one song called If Drinking Don't Kill Me, Her Memory Will. He would change the song called, If Drinking Don't Kill Me, Tammy's Memory Will. He would sing that. Now, they would snipe sometimes back and forth on stage, and they finally, by the 1990s, they did appear to be at peace with each other, and whenever they did perform, the last time would be a song, an album actually they would make in 1990. I'm sorry, yes, in 1990, an album called One. Okay. And they would still go on tour together until Tammy passed away, sadly, in 1998 at a young age. Jones pairing with producer Billy
She wasn't very old, right?
No, she was like, I think she was about 55 or 6.
Yeah, she was
when she passed away. Yeah, she was still very young. I remember that. That was very sad. Now, Jones pairing with producer Billy Sherrill at Epic Records when he hooked up with Tammy came as a surprise to many people, because Sherrill was known more of like as a pop country producer, okay, which was a far cry from what George Jones was. George Jones always thought of himself as like a roots country type person. The combination of Sherrill and Tammy gave George Jones his most successful period in the 70s. Often, though, with his drinking in the studio, things would often be difficult and spiral out of control. Sherrill had his hands full with him, okay? But they were a great team. Now, in the late 70s, George's new manager named Shug Baggett introduced him to cocaine.
Oh, no.
A hell of a drug. Right, Rob?
Hell of a drug.
Okay. Basically, it was because he introduced it to him because he was about to go on stage and he was really too tired to perform.
Oh, so he gave him a little
toot, and that got him going. Okay. But what would happen is, as he, with everything else, he did to excess, and the drug was starting to make him paranoid. He was already paranoid when he was drinking. He was making it worse. Okay. There would be a lot of incidents in the 70s with him involving guns, lawsuits, okay? At times, he was actually broke, okay? Especially after leaving Tammy when they would break Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard, who were good friends with him, came to his rescue on more than one occasion. In 1978, he owed Tammy $36,000 in back child support.
That's crazy.
Which is a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And he claimed to be $1 million in debt altogether. So he declared bankruptcy at that time. By 1979, George was totally broke, declaring bankruptcy and living in his car. All right. And he had dropped his weight down to under 100 pounds.
Oh, man. So he went through some bad times.
Yeah, very bad. Now, Willie Nelson and Linda Ronstadt would come to his help with a new album, okay, that they wanted to record with an all-star cast with him, okay, including Elvis Costello, who was showing a lot of interest in George Jones at that time. It took 2 years for them to make this album, all right, to complete it, because he was in such bad shape and unreliable and sick and, problems. The album was called My Very Special Guests, and it was a success. Jones would enter Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. Upon his release in January 1980, you know what the first thing he did was?
Got a six-pack.
I guess that rehab did not stick.
Sometimes people go and they do good, and sometimes people go and they come out worse.
Yeah. And I don't know how they handled things back then in a psychiatric hospital. Like what were they giving you? Just keeping you sedated for 10 days or something?
I guess so. They probably gave you pills so you stop drinking or something.
So you don't have like the DTs and everything, Yeah. Now, by 1980, George Jones had not had a number one single in 6 years. Some people kind of wrote him off. They said, he's never going to be what he was. But in April of that year, he shocked the industry with the number one single, which is one of his greatest songs, called He Stopped Loving Her Today.
It's a great song.
Right. And shout out to Scott the Clown, who loves that song. We talked about that not too long ago, international. Okay. It topped the country charts for 18 weeks that year. It was number one. And the song was written by Bobby Braddock and Curly Putman. It tells the story of a man whose woman leaves him, and he vows to love her, only her, until he's dead. Okay? The song is sung from the perspective of a friend of his. And, when listening closely to the lyrics after a minute or two, you realize that the man, his friend, is dead. Okay, because he's saying, like, I've finally seen him smile after so many years. And he's dressed like he's about to go away. And we put a wreath on his door, okay, and stuff like that. And you realize that he's finally at peace because he's dead, okay? And the woman of the song, okay, that he loved, goes to the funeral. She showed up at the funeral, okay? So it's just one of these crying your whiskey songs. I said to Scott the Clown that day when we were talking about it, I said, you don't have a soul if you don't like cry at this song. It's like, it's just like it tears at your heartstrings. Okay. I think it's one of the saddest country songs ever written.
It is a sad song.
And it's a classic. It's considered a classic. And it's one of his most famous songs. He originally hated the song, George Jones. He didn't want to do it. Okay.
That's crazy. It was such a classic.
He felt it was too sad that no one's gonna like it. Okay, but obviously he would admit not too long later that it helped revive his career. He would admit to that. He earned a Grammy that year for male country vocal performance. That was 1980. It also became the Country Music Association Song of the Year for 1980 and 1981, which you don't see that happen too much.
Not too much.
No. The success of He Stopped Loving Her Today led CBS Records to renew his contract. He was also the subject of a documentary on HBO called George Jones with a Little Help from His Friends. In the documentary, he performs with Waylon Jennings, Elvis Costello, Tanya Tucker, and Tammy Wynette as well. Jones' outlaw country ways that he had continued despite this new success, he was still using coke and drinking excessively. Okay.
That didn't
On,
stop.
on some award shows, he was obviously lumped up, okay, on stage, very inebriated. He was also involved in several high-speed police chases, including one arrest that was filmed and shown on national TV.
Oh man,
And you can see this clip. I believe it's on YouTube. And he gets in the he pushes the cameraman. And gets in his face and everything. Okay. Now he continued having some more hits through the early '80s, including the song "I'm Not Ready Yet," "Same Old Me," that was backed by the Oak Ridge Boys, "Still Doing Time," and "Tennessee Whiskey." That's another one of his best.
Tennessee Whiskey.
Right. Now, the single "I Always Get Lucky with You" was his last #1 hit, and that was in 1984.
Wow.
Now, in 1981, going back a couple of years, he met Nancy Sepulvado. She was a 34-year-old woman from Mansfield, Louisiana, and she began to have a very positive impact on George. It really can't be overstated how much of an effect she had on him. She took over his finances. She took over his career, managing his career, and kept drug dealers away from him.
Wow.
Yeah, it actually got her jammed up because drug dealers supposedly kidnapped her daughter at one point.
Oh, shit.
I don't know all the details of the story, but it was in retaliation for what she was doing for George. She didn't drink herself, but she could see how alcohol was killing him. She saw the good in him, that he was a good guy, and Jones himself always gave her credit for saving his life. In March '83, after a drunken rampage, Jones was sent to Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital once again, but this time he really did want to quit. So in March of '84, 1 year later, he performed his first sober show in over a decade. He was age 52. Mostly sober for the remainder of the '80s, Jones consistently released albums produced by Cheryl, albums such as Shine On, Jones Country, You've Still Got a Place in My Heart, Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes, and Wine-Colored Roses. All these albums got much critical acclaim and some commercial success as well. They really kept him going. Wine-Colored Roses was also a personal favorite of George Jones, one of his favorite albums of his long career. He would win a CMA Country Music Award for Video of the Year in 1985 with the hit Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes. Billy Sherrill actually makes a cameo appearance in that video as a bus driver. In 1990, Jones released his last proper studio album on Epic called You Ought to Be There With Me. You Ought to Be Here With Me. The album featured the single Hell Stays Open All Night. The single didn't do that well, and Jones would jump over to MCA Records, ending his relationship with Billy Sherrill, who was associated with Epic, and was now, Epic had been bought up by Sony. Okay, so for after 19 years, he was off that label. His first record for MCA was 1991's And Along Came Jones. The album was highly promoted by MCA and did much better commercially than the last one on Epic. However, country music tastes had changed, and the two singles released failed to get much radio airplay. Jones was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1992, and at the ceremony, he was inducted into the hall by Randy Travis. In 1996, Jones released his autobiography called I Live to Tell It All, a book he wrote with Tom Carter. Many tales were told in that book, and it sold well.
God.
Now, a whole chapter of the book is dedicated to how the industry had changed, and they didn't play his music on the radio anymore. How, it was all about country pop, which was something he was very much against. He was one of the major backers of what was called the Association of Country Entertainment. That was a group that was dedicated to promoting traditional country music and that began in 1974, his association with that group. Despite the lack of radio airplay, superstars like Garth Brooks, Randy Travis, and Alan Jackson often paid tribute to Jones's music. On February 17, 1998, the Nashville network premiered The George Jones Show, with Jones as the host. The program featured informal discussions with Jones kind of holding court, talking to these people. Guests included Loretta Lynn, Trace Adkins, Johnny Paycheck, Merle Haggard, Charlie Pride, Bobby Bare, among many others. Now, a popular song by Jones in the late 1990s was 1999's Choices, which is, I think, one of his best songs as well. It's kind of a song about, he's reflecting on his life and saying, I had so many choices. I didn't always make the right ones.
Yeah, because man, the way he lived his career, he definitely lived an outlaw life, just like Cash and Roy Jones, Hank Williams.
Yeah, and that's why I feel that just to get off topic for a second, but I feel that some of these country artists we've talked about and albums and stuff we've talked about during the rock shows, I think it's important to lump these people in because a lot of rock musicians listen to country music, and George Jones is one of these guys that they're listening to. Perfect example would be Keith Richards, I guess. Okay, when the Stones, they have their own country music, which is more country than some country people.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to recognize the Hank Williams and the George Joneses and all that. Even the women, Tammy Wynette, Tanya Tucker, people like that were great. Yeah, and I'm talking the real shit, not the Taylor Swift stuff. None of that. Okay.
Yeah, those people were pioneers. They're the one that started the whole country, because country had a weird thing because it was very popular because they have tried 100 country radio station in New York and never flew.
WHN, I remember that. 1050 on the AM dial. I remember that.
It changed, then it came back, then it left.
Country music never has any success in New York where we grew up.
It's amazing.
You drive around the rest of the country. Okay, there's always country music stations. You don't have to go far.
But not here.
No, not in the Northeast, but you get out of here, you hear it. Now, like I said, Choices, he would get a Grammy for that song for Best Male Country Vocal, 1999. The Country Music Association invited him to appear on their award show, but asked him to perform an abridged version of that song. But Jones refused and was so angry he didn't attend the show. Another performer who was on that show named Alan Jackson, in protest, performed part of the song Choices when his band was on. Okay, bad decision-making by the Country Music Association, I think, Now, on March 6, 1999, Jones was involved in an accident with an SUV near his home. He was hospitalized for 2 weeks. In May, he would plead guilty to DWI charges related to that accident. The accident, however, put the fear of God into George Jones. He would release the Gospel Collection in 2003. Billy Sherrill actually came out of retirement to produce that record for him. He gave up drinking and smoking.
Wow.
Okay. And in 2003, he also saw his appearance at a Johnny Cash tribute show in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where he sang Big River, Johnny Cash song, with Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson. That was when Johnny Cash passed away in 2003. He would receive the Kennedy Center honor in 2008. Rolling Stone magazine had named him number 43 in their 100 greatest singers of all time issue. Okay, he released an album of outtakes called Hits I Missed and One I Didn't, which also included a new version of He Stopped Loving Her Today. He re-recorded it. In 2012, he would receive a Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award.
Wow.
Now, on March 29th, 2012, Joe Jones was taken to the hospital for an upper respiratory infection. In May, he would be rehospitalized for the same thing for 5 days. On August 14th, 2012, Jones announced his farewell tour. It was dubbed the Grand Tour, with scheduled stops in 60 cities. The Grand Tour was also a name of one of his most famous songs. His final concert was in 2013 in Knoxville, Tennessee, at the Knoxville Civic Center on April 6th. He was scheduled to perform his final show at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville on November 22nd, 2013. However, on April 18th, 2013, Jones was hospitalized for a high fever and a very irregular blood pressure. Following 6 days in the ICU, George Jones would pass away on April 26, 2013, at the age of 81. At his funeral, former First Lady Laura Bush eulogized him. That was on May 2nd, 2013. Other speakers included some local politicians and famous country artists like Alan Jackson, the Oak Ridge Boys, and Charlie Daniels.
Yeah, that's the who's who's.
Yeah, exactly. The huge service was actually broadcast live on CMT, GAC, RFD TV, the Nashville Network, and Family Net, as well as Nashville stations. Sirius XM had it. WSM 650 AM, which is the home of the Grand Ole Opry, broadcasted the funeral on the radio. The family requested all donations to go to the Grand Ole Opry or the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. Jones was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee. His death made headlines worldwide, and country music stations modified their playlists and played George Jones sets throughout the day. The week after his death, He Stopped Loving Her Today re-entered the country charts at number 21.
It's pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing career. But man, I didn't realize how many times he went to rehab and how much alcohol he had. But the story with him taking the lawnmower, the track,
legendary.
That's just great.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta love it.
I'm a liquor store.
You won't give me my car, I'll drive my lawnmower.
I wonder how long it took him to get to the store.
They said it was over an hour. The thing only went like 5 miles an hour, and it was 8 miles away, so it had to be an hour and a half or something to get there. Yeah. Imagine driving down the street and seeing George Jones on his lawnmower. I mean, somebody had to pass him on the road.
Yeah. He's like, hey, is that John Jones?
Is that George Jones driving his lawnmower? No, it can't be.
Yeah, his lawnmower. His tractor to get liquor.
I wonder how they got it back.
Yeah.
Did somebody drive it back?
I know, but I think his wife found him, right? That's what it was.
Yeah, but I mean, unless she had a truck or something to put it in, it wasn't, you can't lift those things. They're heavy.
Oh, my God. That's great. That's great.
No, but I mean, he had a long, long career, a long life, definitely not a boring life. Yeah, he lived to excess. So do a lot of people. Okay, yeah. They don't have the success that he had. I think he's one of the greatest, just artists in general. Songwriters, singer-songwriters, and in the country genre, he's he's like in the top
number one,
top four.
Wow.
You got Johnny Cash, you got him, you got Hank Williams. And then you could talk about maybe Merle Haggard, a couple other people.
Yeah,
but he's got to be in the top 3 or 4. George Jones, absolutely.
Yeah,
and he sold a lot of records too.
Yeah, he's definitely up there. With the 4 top country music, he's either going to be 1 or he's going to be like 2 or whatever. Because he's definitely up there.
Yeah, and
I think he might be the top. Because he was also very well.
I don't know if I don't know where he stands in record sales. I don't think he's the greatest country music artist ever. You never know. Some of these new guys today might have eclipsed George Jones, only because of the way that it is today. But I don't really know the answer to that. But I just know that as far as being influential, there's really very few people that are close to him. So, and a shout out to Doc Holliday's bar down on Avenue A and 9th Street, because they got like a bunch of George Jones CDs in
Oh
there.
yeah, they got a bunch of. They got a lot of this songs. You'll hear this song, "Not Loving Me Today" anytime in Docs.
He stopped loving her today. I've heard that in there. Yeah.
You'll be dead out of nowhere. That song coming, you're like, where the hell are they? Who would play this?
Yeah, who played it? Yep. Well, you know, whoever played it's the guy crying into his whiskey at the bar right there. Just look for that guy. Might be me. You never know. All right. So with that, we'll end the show. Another good show, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah. Man, those stories that you told were fantastic. I never realized he had such a drinking problem.
Yeah, it was legendary, man. I mean, he was known for that, you know, showing up drunk and everything. But where can we find you, Rob, on social media?
You can find me on any social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Getting Lumped Up, and you can find me on the Rockshow, Facebook fan page. We
the
got
Rockshow
a lot of
podcast
people
group
on there.
page. Yeah.
There's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And they changed it a little bit. They want you to start chatting now, something like that.
I saw that. I didn't really have an interest.
Yeah.
Facebook is always doing something new. I don't care.
Yeah.
But
when can we reach you, Mike?
If you're looking for me, I'm Facebook under Rocco Mike, okay, because they won't let me be Rocker Mike, but Rocco Mike. Very active there. Also, the Rock Show podcast group page with you on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram under Rocker Mike 212. You can find me on Twitter under Rocker Mike 212. You can find me under Rocker Mike on Parler, MeWe, True Social, Getter, anything else. Just look for Rocker Mike. Google that shit. You'll find me with my face made for radio somewhere. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
On that note, remember, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you soon.
Take care, people.
I'm getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi. I'm getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi. Well, I'm lumped up, but I'm okay. It's gonna get lumped up anyway. You better call back the posse. Just getting lumped up with Rocker Mike and Rob Rossi.